He said calmly, "You're looking good, Jake?" My name on their lips sent a jolt of fear through me. How did they know my name? Who was this person? I grew up in a quiet suburb where life mostly revolved around simple routines. One of my fondest memories from my childhood was the game of hide and seek that I often played with my mother. Our suburban neighborhood, with its rows of identical houses and neatly manicured lawns, provided the perfect backdrop for our games. My mother and I shared a special bond, and hide and seek became our way of strengthening that connection. It was a simple game, but it brought us endless joy. In those carefree moments, I could forget about the world's complexities and immerse myself in the thrill of the hunt. Our games usually followed the same pattern. I would count to 100 with my eyes closed, while my mother found the perfect hiding spot. Then, with a grin on my face, I'd set off to search for her. It was a game of laughter and discovery, where each hiding place offered a new surprise. The suburban setting added an element of familiarity to our games. The occasional sound of lawnmowers or children playing in the distance became the soundtrack to our adventures. There was comfort in knowing that our little world remained unchanged, a constant in the midst of life's uncertainties. It all began with a simple game of hide and seek, just like the countless times before. I closed my eyes and counted as my mother scampered off to find her hiding spot. The cool breeze rustled the leaves in the nearby trees, and I could hear the distant laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. Everything seemed normal, but little did I know that this game would take a sinister turn. When I finished counting, I opened my eyes and began my search. I moved through the familiar suburban landscape, calling out for my mother. My voice echoed through the quiet streets, but there was no response. As I turned a corner, I saw a figure lurking in the shadows. At first, I thought it was my mother, hiding in plain sight. But as I approached, I realized that something was off. The figure was tall and cloaked in darkness, their features obscured. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette of a person standing there, watching me. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the mysterious figure. I had the distinct feeling that they were not there to play a harmless game of hide and seek. Fear gripped me, and I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me, back to the safety of our home. When I reached our front door, I slammed it shut and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. I told my mother about the strange encounter, but she dismissed it as a product of an overactive imagination. Little did we know that this encounter was just the beginning of a series of terrifying events. A few days after the eerie hide-and-seek incident, my mother sent me to the local supermarket to pick up some groceries. It was a bright and sunny day, and I tried to push the memory of the shadowy figure from my mind. But as I walked through the store, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I reached the cereal aisle and began browsing the shelves. I felt a growing unease, as if I was being watched. I turned around, and there at the end of the aisle was the same mysterious figure from the hide-and-seek game. They were dressed in dark clothing, their face still hidden in shadow. Panic welled up inside me as I stared at the figure. Shoppers bustled around us, oblivious to the eerie presence in their midst. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The figure didn't move, didn't say a word. They just watched me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Summoning every ounce of courage, I turned and fled from the aisle, abandoning my shopping cart. I raced to the front of the store, my heart pounding in my chest. I told the store manager about the stranger, but when we returned to the cereal aisle, the figure was gone, leaving no trace behind. The encounter left me shaken and terrified. Who was this mysterious person, and why were they following me? I couldn't find any answers, and my mother still believed it was just a figment of my imagination. It was a quiet evening, and my mother had asked me to retrieve some old photo albums from the attic. I hesitated for a moment as I climbed the creaky stairs, the memory of the previous encounters fresh in my mind. But I couldn't let fear control me. I had a task to complete. As I reached the attic door, I opened it slowly and stepped into the dimly lit space. The air was thick with nostalgia and forgotten memories, and the soft glow from a single bulb cast eerie shadows on the walls. I rummaged through the dusty boxes, searching for the photo albums my mother had requested. Suddenly, I heard a whisper, barely audible, like a faint breeze rustling through the attic. My heart raced as I turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner, their silhouette cast in darkness. This time, I was determined to confront them. I took a step closer, my voice trembling as I asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure remained silent, their features hidden in the shadows. I could sense their presence, an unsettling energy that filled the confined space. As I inched closer, a flash of lightning illuminated the attic, revealing the figure's vague outline, but not enough to recognize their face. I could feel their gaze on me, a chilling sensation that sent shivers down my spine. "Stay back!" I warned, my fear giving way to a growing sense of unease. I'm not afraid to call for help, but still, the figure didn't respond. Growing more desperate, I retreated from the attic, leaving the shadowy presence behind. I rushed downstairs to find my mother, panic in my voice as I explained what I had encountered. Together, we climbed back up to the attic, but to our astonishment, it was empty. The boxes had been disturbed, and old photographs were scattered haphazardly across the floor. There was no sign of the mysterious figure, no trace of their presence. My mother looked at me with concern, her eyes filled with worry. "Are you sure you saw someone, Jake?" I nodded, my heart still pounding. "I saw them, Mom. I heard their whisper, but now they're gone." We spent the next hour cleaning up the mess, carefully collecting the scattered photos and returning them to their boxes. My mother assured me that it was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me, that there was no one else in the attic. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something inexplicable and unsettling. The encounter left me bewildered, questioning my own senses, and the mystery of the attic remained unsolved. As the storm outside raged on, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this strange occurrence than met the eye. The attic was eerily quiet as I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that there was more to the story than what my mother had told me. Clutched in my trembling hand was a photograph, a link between the shadowy figure and my past. I stared at the image in shock. It was a picture of my mother and a man I had never seen before, but there was no mistaking it. The same shadowy figure from the attic was standing beside her. My mind raced as I tried to process the implications of what I was seeing. Unable to contain my astonishment, I rushed downstairs, the photograph clutched tightly in my hand. My mother was in the kitchen, and I must have looked frantic because she immediately asked, "What's wrong, Jake?" I held out the photograph, my voice trembling as I asked, "Who is this man, Mom? And why is he in our attic?" My mother's face paled as she glanced at the photo, her eyes widening in surprise. She quickly composed herself and said, "Jake, it's just an old photo. Probably a distant relative you've never met." But I could see through her forced calmness. There was unease in her eyes, a hint of fear that she couldn't hide. I pressed on, my determination growing. "Tell me the truth, Mom. Who is he? Is he Dad?" Her hesitation was enough of an answer. She reluctantly nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Jake, he's your father." My heart sank, and a rush of questions flooded my mind. "But you told me Dad was dead." She avoided my gaze and busied herself with a nearby dish, her voice quivering as she replied, "He's been dead a long time, Jake. It's a painful part of our past, and I didn't want to burden you with it." I felt a mixture of emotions, shock, betrayal, and a gnawing sense that I had been kept in the dark about a significant part of my own family history. My father, the shadowy figure in our attic, was not only alive in that photograph, but he was also alive in my memory. My mother excused herself from the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Something didn't add up. I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that my mother was hiding much more than she had revealed. It was as though a veil had been lifted, revealing a hidden side of my family's past that I had never known. With a newfound determination, I returned to the attic, determined to uncover the truth. Amidst the dusty boxes and scattered photographs, I stumbled upon an old weathered journal. Its title sent shivers down my spine: Mafia Boss Dead. I opened the journal and flipped through its pages, my eyes widening with each passing word. The entries detailed a dangerous world of organized crime, drug deals, and secrets. My father had indeed been a mafia boss and a drug dealer. The man I had seen in the attic was not a figment of my imagination, but a ghost from a dark and hidden past. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My father's double life was laid bare before me, a stark contrast to the memories of him I had held dear. It was a revelation that shook me to my core, and I knew there was no turning back. The truth was out, and it raised more questions than answers. And the most important was, why had he resurfaced in our attic after all these years? The storm outside continued to rage, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. I knew that I had stumbled upon a tangled web of lies and deceit, and I was determined to unravel it, no matter where it led me. With the journal clutched in my hand, I descended from the attic, my mind racing with the weight of newfound knowledge. The mystery of my father's past and his reappearance in our lives had taken center stage, and there was no escaping the chilling truth that now bound me to a legacy I had never asked for. The attic encounter had left me shaken, but it had also steeled my resolve. I was now convinced that my father would reappear, and I needed to be prepared for that moment. Every night I laid in bed with a notebook, jotting down questions, suspicions, and thoughts. I wanted answers, and I was determined to get them. Months passed, and my anticipation grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that the next encounter with my father was imminent. I knew I had to be vigilant, ready to confront him with the burning questions that had plagued me for so long. One evening, as I sat alone in a dimly lit restaurant, my senses on high alert, it happened. A well-dressed man, exuding an air of confidence and authority, entered and casually strolled towards my table. My heart raced as I recognized him immediately. My father. He took a seat across from me, and for a moment, we locked eyes in an intense, wordless exchange. The seconds felt like hours as I mentally rehearsed the questions I had meticulously crafted. I had rehearsed my defiance, my refusal to be drawn into his world, his criminal activities. But before I could utter a word, my father began to speak. His voice was surprisingly calm, his tone measured. He explained that he wanted me to take over his business, to step into his shoes and continue the legacy he had built. I was stunned, my mind racing to comprehend the weight of his request. I refused without hesitation, my words firm and resolute. I wanted no part in the world he had chosen, no involvement in the darkness that had shrouded our family for years. I implored him to leave me and my mother alone, to let us live our lives free from his influence. But my father's demeanor shifted, his face contorted with anger and frustration. He leaned in closer, his voice growing harsher, and I could see the danger in his eyes. It was then that I realized how truly menacing he could be. Before the situation escalated further, a wave of relief washed over me as the restaurant's entrance burst open, and a swarm of uniformed police officers flooded in. It turned out that my mother had believed me this time. I had confided in her about my suspicions and my determination to confront my father, and she, in turn, had taken action. As the officers surrounded us, my father's anger turned to desperation. He realized he was outnumbered and outmatched. The police demanded his identification, and he reluctantly complied. It was clear that he had not anticipated this level of resistance. In the midst of the commotion, my mother arrived at the scene, her face a mix of worry and relief. She explained my father's past, the dangerous world he had once been a part of, and the threats he had posed to our family. I had convinced her that he would return, that we needed to be prepared, and she had taken the necessary steps to ensure our safety. As my father was handcuffed and led away by the police, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and closure. The years of uncertainty, fear, and secrecy were finally coming to an end. In the aftermath of that restaurant encounter, I learned the truth about my father's criminal past, the extent of his involvement in the underworld, and the dangers he had posed to our family. It was a painful revelation, but it also brought a sense of finality to a chapter of my life that had been defined by secrecy and deception.